So the author E.B. White, who you may know from the children's books Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web, famously said, "I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve the world and a desire to enjoy the world, and this makes it hard to plan the day." Well, maybe you can relate to that. If nothing else, we Unitarian Universalists are well known for our desire to improve the world. Partly that is theological, as a religious tradition that rejects this splitting of reality into a perfect heaven above, where we will hopefully dwell someday, and a fallen and sinful world below, where we're kind of stuck for the time being. We reject this tradition, and so we feel called to direct our energy and attention to bringing this certainly imperfect world one step closer to peace and justice, kindness and compassion, sorts of things we might associate with a heaven. Our 7 UU principles challenge us to improve the world in many ways, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. But does Unitarian Universalism have anything to say about our enjoyment of the world, is our meditation for today. And so with that question in mind, I wanted to turn to one of our most important principles, the 7th principle. 7th UU principle is respect for the interdependent web of life of which we are all a part. This principle calls us to care for the earth and for other living beings. It challenges us to be part of the delegation for the four-footed that Oren Lyons noted was so sorely missing at the United Nations. And we must add, unfortunately, that delegation for the four-footed is missing here at home in our own domestic political scene. Global warming, arguably the most important issue currently facing us, concerning as it does the long-term survival of all life on Earth. Global warming received just slightly over a minute's attention over 4 presidential and vice presidential debates. And that wasn't even a question asked by a moderator. That was a question asked by Ken Bone, the audience member of the Immortal Red Sweater, who asked a question about clean energy. And it is worth pointing out that the 2 candidates in this election, the 2 leading candidates in this election, have very different positions on this issue of global warming. So they're like really a substantive conversation to be had about these 2 candidates, but no one wants to talk about it. And no one wants to talk about related issues like the accelerating loss of animal diversity in the world, or about the stresses we are putting on the oceans. So there is no delegation for the four-footed at the table, or the no-footed at the table. By the way, speaking of the no-footed, there is an ocean-dwelling creature called the sea cucumber. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like this majestic little squashy worm thing. And it has this remarkable behavior that when it's confronted with extreme stress, like from a predator, it will eject its internal organs and swim away. And I have to say that after this election season, I totally get that. Just, totally get that. But it would be a mistake to reduce our 7th principle to just being a statement about policy or politics or activism, even about something as important as global warming. Our 7th principle is not please recycle, or please have a sustainable lifestyle, or please help fight poaching. 7th principle is a religious principle in a religious context, which means it is fundamentally about how we understand ourselves and our place in this world. We are called to understand, we are called to be in deep sympathetic relationship with the natural world. That is what our 7th principle is asking of us, that we be in deep sympathetic relationship with the natural world. We're called to understand that we are a part of a continuous, evolving, unfolding, radiant flowering of life on earth. That we are bound up inextricably as an expression of this same titanic creative energy. As the poet Rabindranath Tagore said, the same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. Or as The UU minister for his church put it, all life springs from a common source and shares a common destiny. All life. This is the scientific worldview, but for Unitarian Universalists, it also has deep spiritual and ethical implications. Unitarian Universalism calls us to embrace our kinship with the natural world, and in that kinship find reverence and joy and wonder. And then from that place of joyful relationship, from that place we decide how will we be in the world and how will we be with the world. Now in our Age of Reason ceremony today, I mentioned the naturalist Rachel Carson, a remarkable scientist and journalist, also a Unitarian, whose book Silent Spring about the dangers of chemical spraying helped launch the modern environmental movement in the 1960s. One would be hard-pressed to find a better example of someone who set out to improve the world. Deliberately, passionately, and persistently. And at the heart of that passion and sustaining that persistence was her deep love for the natural world, her enjoyment of the world. So, not at all in conflict with a desire to improve the world, as Mr. E.B. White would have it, her joy fueled her desire to help the world. Carson was a Unitarian whose inner life, her spiritual life, if you will, was nourished by her wonder and curiosity about the natural world. Before writing Silent Spring, Carson was a zoologist who worked for the Fish and Wildlife Services. And in the 1950s, she wrote 3 popular books about the ocean. And in an essay by Lisa Sedaris titled The Secular and Religious Sources of Rachel Carlson's Sense of Wonder, Sedaris notes that Carson was consistently praised as a writer for her ability to translate scientific data into magic and enchantment. And Carson herself said that if there was poetry in her writing about the sea, it was not because she put it there deliberately, but because, as she said, no one could write truthfully about the sea and leave out the poetry. Well, Silent Spring was published in 1962, and Carson died of breast cancer in 1964. And toward the end of her too short life, as Rachel Carson is testifying before Congress about the dangers of pesticides, and she's fending off personal attacks from chemical companies, and she's trying to get this message out, this very important message about protecting and preserving our environment. At the same time, she was working on another book. And this was not a book about politics or policy or activism. This was a book for parents and children. It was a book for parents to share with their children, and it was about preserving and rekindling our capacity to feel joy and wonder and reverence in our personal encounter with the natural world. Joy and wonder and reverence. The book was published posthumously under the title The Age of Wonder. And Carson wrote, "If facts are the seeds that later produce knowledge and wisdom, then the emotions and the impressions of the senses are the fertile soil in which the seeds must grow. The years of early childhood are the time to prepare the soil. Once the emotions have been aroused, a sense of the beautiful, the excitement of the new and the unknown, a feeling of sympathy or love, then we wish for knowledge about the object of our emotions." And she said, "It is our misfortune that for most of us, that clear-eyed vision, that true instinct for what is beautiful and awe-inspiring is dimmed or even lost before we reach adulthood." This instinct for the beautiful and the awe-inspiring is what Walt Whitman was addressing in our opening words today when he said, "I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. And the pismire," that's an ant, "is equally perfect, and a grain of sand and the egg of the wren, and the cow crunching with depressed head surpasses any statue, and a mouse is miracle enough to stagger sextillions of infidels." And to that list I would add, by the way, the sea cucumber, which feeds by burying itself in the sand and then extending upwards a forest of colorful tendrils that filter stray particles of food from the water. And while feeding, the sea cucumber transforms itself from this sort of fat, brown, worm-like thing into what is for all the world like a field of flowers flowing in the ocean currents. I had no idea it did this until I saw it on YouTube, and it is breathtaking and it is marvelous, the transformation that this creature undergoes and the beauty of this unassuming creature, and it cleans the ocean in the process. So well done, Mr. Sea Cucumber. Well done. Well, the world needs now more than ever citizens who are committed to protecting and preserving our shared home. People who understand the stresses we are placing on fragile ecosystems, the much greater dangers we face in the long term. We, all of us, need to be part of the solution. And I'm very proud to be a part of this church, which has made a commitment to be a certified green congregation, which has done groundbreaking work in the state of Indiana, both in adopting sustainable practices and in teaching other churches how to adopt sustainable practices. I applaud our green team for their leadership and the individual members of this congregation for the work they have done. We should all be deeply proud of that. And of course, there's much, much more to do. Friends, the reality is we are in a race to forestall and undo the harm we are currently doing to our planet. You have heard it said, this is a marathon and not a sprint. Well, we are in a marathon and a sprint. That is the race that we are running right now. We have to act with urgency, we have to act now, but at the same time we have to act with commitment and endurance and persistence and determination and faithfulness. We have to be in it for the long haul, with an eye not just on what is good for us, but what is good for our children and our children's children, and what is good for this beautiful planet, our home, and the full panoply of living things who are our kin, and with whom we share this fragile space. To run a race like that, you need plenty of fuel. You need spiritual rocket fuel to run a race like that. And so I encourage you to make it a regular practice in your life to turn your mind and your heart and your senses with their full open innocence back to the beauty of this natural world, back to the majesty and the life and the thrill that is all around you. And out of that place of love and beauty, let us work for the day when we will say as one people, remember, remember the circle of the sky, the stars and the brown eagle, the supernatural winds. Remember, remember the sacredness of things. Blessed be, and amen.